How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. We have such an exciting panel, and I know there are going to be some major keys dropped, so if you have your phone out, definitely take notes. I think we can get started here. So we have Lamar Hines from RGA. We have Charles Duncan from Leo Burnett. We have Kate Oppenheim from Missing Pieces. And we have Husani Oakley from Goldbean. It's exciting. All right. So I know we're at the end of the day. Solange just released an album. Luke Cage is out. So we're going to keep this super interesting. And there's liquor involved after. So I know that's important. I want to get started by obviously introducing what you do, but asking a really specific question. Typically on panels like this, people ask about big breaks, but I think that sort of misaligns the fact that a lot of you worked for specific opportunities. So I'd love to hear what you do now, but also really quickly a specific opportunity you took advantage of in your career that you think has paid the most dividends.
Okay. So I'm Lamar Hines. I'm a senior technology director at RGA. And my path started in undergraduate in visual design. So I started on the creative side of things from a visual perspective. And during my undergraduate career, I started to, get attracted in manifesting my creativity through technology, essentially. So I started to build interactive video projects, and through that, I basically put together spoken word, video, and code, and those things came together for interactive storytelling. So during my time in undergraduate, I had exposure to an excellent mentor. So one thing that I would say is seek mentorship because that can be incredibly valuable, and I did just that. And through my mentor, I was able to work with him to kind of work on building my skills and establishing myself. And through that, I've been able to ultimately get to where I'm at today and finding my true passion in technology.
Great. Thank you. My name is Charles Duncan. I'm the SVP Director of Technology at Leo Burnett, based in Chicago, part of the Publicis family. So at Leo Burnett, I lead a 45-person tech and user experience team, building all kind of stuff, product, banners, websites, you name it. But I would say from a career standpoint, in terms of a big break, I started my career actually about a block and a half from here where the previous RG offices were. And I was a developer there, loved it, but taking the opportunity to move cross-country to San Francisco, stepping out of my comfort zone of New York City, going to a place that I knew no one, had no family, in San Francisco was probably the best decision that I made. It kicked off my leadership roles and management positions, stuff like that. So I'd say that was probably my big break. It was more of mentally freeing yourself to step out of your comfort zone.
My name's Kate Oppenheim, and I'm a partner and executive producer at Missing Pieces, which is an integrated production company. We like to call it a new wave production company based in New York, but we also have an office in LA. And I think for me, I started my career at Ogilvy. I was there for a little less than 5 years. And I met my now business partner, Ari, because I hired him on a project to make a video for Cisco in 2009. And I realized that he was thinking about all the same things I was thinking about in terms of what content was going to look like on the internet, content of all kinds, except that he was getting to go make it all the time, and I was making PowerPoint decks. And I found that to be really depressing. I took a really enormous and, in retrospect, reckless risk in quitting my very stable job and trying to go run a production company, which I knew literally nothing about. So that was by far the biggest pivot point in my adult life. It totally changed the direction that my whole career has taken, and I think you know, looking at it now, there have been 1,000 things that have contributed to where the company has come today. And I like that you started by saying there are no big breaks. Like, there have been so many times where people have been like, oh, you guys seem like you've just come out of nowhere. Like, man, we're on like year 12 of this. So it really is a series of risks and decisions and rewards and failures. But looking back on it, I mean, for me, it was absolutely striking out on my own.
Hi, I'm Husani Oakley. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a fintech startup called Goldbean. And I've spent the majority of my career in advertising, and 75% of people at Goldbean also come from the advertising world. And there are no big breaks. That just doesn't happen. I started in this industry when I was 18. I just graduated high school. My plan had been, I'm taking a gap year. My parents are like, no, you're not. I was like, no, I am. I'm a musician. This is my passion and my soul. I'm gonna play my sax and my clarinet, and that's gonna be the thing. And the mom's like, you're getting a job. So I'd actually gotten an internship in front-end development, but it wasn't called that back then, at a company called Agency.com. This is like mid-90s. I'm not saying the year because then you know how old I am, and that just kills my pretending to be a child. And 2 weeks into my internship, we all realized that none of us had any idea what we were doing, because again, this is the mid-90s, and this is pre-consumer web. So we're all like, hey, we need a website for our big client, which was British Airways. And they, for some reason, were paying a bunch of us kids way too much money to make their main global web presence. And we figured it out, and we kind of moved forward from there. And at any sort of pivot point through my career, it's always just been you're just grinding away at the work. There's no I've done this and then boom, I've made it. It's no, I say my title is Chief Technology Officer, and yeah, that's all awesome and glamorous sounding, but no, even now, the time is spent 20 hours a day, work, and you're able to build enough of a body of work to kind of get you to the next level, but it's only just one level more, and there's one level more. And then you think you're at the top, and you look up, and you're like, oh, damn, there's still some steps I gotta get going. So it never really, even though there are pivot points, there aren't I'm done points, which I find really fascinating.
It's awesome. Charles, you mentioned your team is doing everything. You're building all types of stuff. I'd like to start with you. How do you see and keep your team focused on technology as a creative medium as opposed to a separate entity? I think a lot of people talk about you have the tech side, you got the creative side, but you do a lot of work melding those together and building beautiful experiences.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So one project we have internally is essentially an internal CRM tool. There's 4 .NET developers on it, no front-end developers, no creatives, extremely requirements-driven. And that's part of marketing work that we do, right? So you have to be able to maintain being able to build that. But then I also have creatives in the building who know how to make TV commercials, have a big idea for something interactive, and how do you have people on the technology team that can say, just give me your big idea, just write something down on a napkin, tell me what you think, and let's riff on it and try to build on that. And a lot of it is making sure there's balance on the team, that you're bringing on technology people that have a creative eye. Maybe those are the tech people that went to art school. Maybe those are the tech people that, like to animate, whether it might be, having them on the team, as well as people that can kind of crank out requirements and just having a balance of team people. And also, I think probably one of the biggest things is how do you wait to say no, right? It was a classic example of creators don't want to include a tech person in a conversation because the tech person is going to say, it can't be done, not enough time. And you have to reinforce your tech team, go in a room, just try to help create what that idea can be, right? Don't worry about the feasibility of it yet. Eventually you do, but don't squash people's dreams up front. So I think those sort of things are extremely important.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, it's not just about being there to say yes or no. It's also being an active participant. So in a conversation, using your technology lens to say, I can use this as my palette to paint. And there are certain things that you understand as a technologist that can help you guide a user experience. And there's a power in that, and there's a unique perspective that comes from being deeply entrenched in understanding technology. And that stands for if you're a software developer, but also as a creative on the other aisle, it's important for you to have that literacy so that you know different avenues that you can approach when you're creating an experience.
Kate and Sonny, I know you guys are on the startup side of things, so technology obviously is part of the base, but it is sort of the ubiquitous term now, like I'm building a startup, we gotta have tech, it's exciting. How have you seen sort of that ideology play itself out in the businesses you're doing, which are obviously cross-functional, but require that sort of skill set too?
Yeah, it's even to build on what's been talked about with creatives on one side and techs on the other. I kind of liken it to if you're a screenwriter, it's not like you never talk to the director of photography because it's technical. Like that's silly. You got to understand how the medium that you create in works from an infrastructure standpoint because it pushes the idea. And on the infrastructure side, you've got to understand how the sort of larger concept works. Otherwise, you're building engineering in a vacuum, which is kind of useless. And on the startup side, we are a product, and we do a very specific thing. It's in finance. It's user-facing and kind of fun and interesting, but there's a real hardcore engineering component to it, right? And it's sort of outside of a creative's core competency. We're looking at numbers and I walk past numbers and creatives. It's not really. We have spreadsheets, so sorry. And that is great, but if we also don't have a way to tell the story behind those numbers and what we're doing and how we're crunching those numbers, it ends up being sort of useless. And the interesting thing about running a startup, again, with 75% of the company, including the rest of my executive team, coming from advertising. I ran technology at Wieden and Kennedy. My CEO was president of Y&R and COO at McGarry Bowen. We're old school agency people. Being able to shift a team's mindset from we are doing this work for a client and we need to have a very creative focus and a very technology focus to there is no creative in tech. We're making one thing. Everybody, of course, we're all going to sit in the same room because we're on the same team. We're making the same thing. It's silly to think otherwise. The nice thing about a startup is that we're making up our process as we go and we're building our corporate culture as we go. So we're able to sort of set that as how we do things. It's in our DNA from the beginning, as opposed to going into an agency where perhaps that hasn't been set up yet, having to kind of work towards that. It's really freeing, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, we're talking backstage about some of the cool work that you've done around experiential and stuff like that. And one specific example you gave was how you did VR with the NBA, which is dope. Can you talk about how important you think that is for advertising in the future and making sure those integrated experiences are a core part of how consumers are starting to deal with real life as it's displayed?
Yeah. I mean, I think doing integrated work in general is the reason why Missing Pieces has found success at all. I was at Ogilvy Entertainment before I went to Missing Pieces, and the thing that we were trying to do in that group between 2006 and 2010, when internet video was really in its infancy. I don't know if you guys remember what internet video was like in 2006 and 2007, but it was 144 or 240, and if somebody wiped their arm across the screen, it would blur. But it was clear even then that that's where we were gonna spend our time. We, people, not advertisers, but humans were going to spend their time on the internet and find ways to make connections between what was happening on our little phones and what was happening on our big screens and what was happening in our real lives. And I think that is, continuing to evolve and mature, but it's becoming more and more mature. And that's why I think that experiential marketing, both real life experiential marketing, but also VR experiential marketing is becoming more and more important because we want to have experiences in our lives. It's a great place and a great way for brands to connect with people in a way that's meaningful. But we are also more and more willing as consumers to share those experiences. If a brand gives us a good experience, we are willing to talk about it. That was true when we did all the content around RBMA, when it came to New York for the first time in 2013. You would go to those shows and people would have their phones in the air and would be hashtagging RBMA like crazy. And it kind of blew my mind because it was the first time that I felt like I was seeing a brand craft truly branded, like not trying to hide it at all, completely branded experiences in real life that were designed for social. And we've sort of taken that forward in the work that we're doing. We did a pop-up restaurant for Google Translate this year that was really, the live experience was designed around social media. And the content that you can extract from that, whether it's the video that we as a production company go make that's very professional and emotional and tells like kind of the glossy story around it, or the content that people are sharing, like thousands and thousands of photos of the 30,000 donuts that we gave out on the sidewalk, that's all equally important, and it sort of fills out a prism of meaning for consumers who see it. VR, I think everyone acknowledges, is completely in its infancy, but for me as a producer, as a filmmaker, as a creative person, being involved in the creation of a new medium that has no known conventions, that the power of which is so clear to everyone who tries a good VR experience from the start, is like the most exciting thing that's happened in my career, and I think we're only starting to understand what's important about it.
Exciting, it's awesome. For anybody else, I think we transition here to trends. Like, what is exciting you guys about what you're seeing in your roles and about new emerging technologies that are in its infancy, as Kate said, but you see as going to be inherently disruptive?
I think machine learning and artificial intelligence is very interesting. It's a space that you're starting to see every major company make a massive investment in. And there are a lot of implications for operational efficiency, creative output, and ultimately how we create great experiences. I believe we have some JWT folks here. One good example that they worked on was the next Rembrandt, where they just took a massive amount of data from Rembrandt works, and they essentially used that to create a system that could create its own painting in the style of Rembrandt. And that's a great example of how technology is directly driving the creative process. But above and beyond that, there's many other contexts right now. So you're seeing brands do things for all sorts of recommendations and applications that have predictive qualities. Under Armour has an application now that they're working on in partnership with IBM Watson, where they're exploring automated fitness recommendations so that you have training plans that evolve to who you are specifically, which is incredibly powerful for a brand looking to engage with consumers on an individual basis. So there's a lot to kind of play with there and a ton going on in that space. And I see that growing across every business vertical.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think whether you look at VR, AI, machine learning, personalization, it's really all about trying to tell a story or elicit a emotional response from someone. So a mobile app, VR experience, a banner in Times Square that says tweet this, share this, download that. It's just all about trying to tell a story. I mean, that's how you really engage people. And obviously, if you can also take that storytelling element and interject a layer of utility so they get some kind of useful, helpful out of it, I think is extremely powerful. And it's sort of taking that lens and then matching it up against whatever the most powerful technologies of the day is, where you create really powerful work like the Rembrandt. I mean, who would have thought 4 years ago, like, you're going to recreate artwork from someone who's passed hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but like it's in their essence. It's pretty powerful.
Bots are changing the world and are going to, and I'm fascinated by this because we're just now figuring out how that human-machine interaction can happen. And it reminds me of every single time we've seen a shift in how people in general sort of consume technology and thus consume stories and brand messages. It takes them some time in the beginning to figure out the best way to get that story across to people, and then it becomes a practice. Like, you know, when the advent of the consumer web, should a logo be in the upper left-hand corner? I don't know. Just put it there and see what happens. And then with the advent of mobile devices, it's like, who knew that the action of using your thumb and pulling a screen down would act as sort of a metaphor for reloading a thing, right? But it feels logical and it makes sense. The challenge, I think, and the sort of really cool part for anybody getting into this right now is there is a whole new world about to start where we get to define what that interaction is like, right? I can pull out my phone and have a conversation with you know, artificial intelligence thing. How does that conversation happen? What's the syntax of the language? What is the tone of the response from the bot? All of that is connected to storytelling and a brand. So I use a scheduling bot called Amy to manage my calendar. And it creeps people out when I'm really sort of rude to what they think is my assistant. So, you know, I'll email and it's like, hey, Amy, set up that coffee at 2 p.m. Do it now. And, you know, the person I'm emailing is like, Husani, jeez, like, calm it down. It's no, that's actually artificial intelligence. What are the social norms that begin to emerge in this new area, and how do we as an industry, you know, not only figure out those norms and push those norms, but tell stories through them for brands? I think it's a fascinating time and a really great opportunity for folks who are getting into this right now.
Awesome. So we are at a conference called Here Are All the Black People. So it would be remiss to not talk about what that means for marginalized communities, but specifically as technologists or people that tell stories. I think we've all seen an uptick in the ability to watch something that is disingenuous, have it be recorded and then spread. I think about Philando Castile, whose untimely death was actually became a viral sensation. And so I'd be curious, in your work, knowing that in many respects you can be the gatekeeper to large pieces of access and information, how you balance social consciousness with the need to sort of keep developing and pushing forward. As you mentioned, this technology is in fact opening a new gateway, but without checks and balances, it can be just as inequitable as the world we live in. So I'd be curious how you sort of intersect those things and how that informs your work.
So to build on Hassani's bots conversation, you know, one of the things that, you know, our team has been proud to work on, which we just launched, was a voter bot. So, you know, we're at a critical time in this nation, and there's a very important election coming up. And if you look back to the previous general election, between people that were not registered or registered and did not participate, you have over 40% of the people that were able to vote did not vote in the last election. And what we were looking to accomplish here is through a partnership with Ad Council, leveraging Facebook Messenger to create a bot to reach people where they're at. So today, one of the reasons that bots are very powerful now is that messaging is now starting to surpass usage of traditional social networks. So it's really an active channel where you can activate at a mass scale. And through our bot, what we're looking to accomplish across the states nationally is giving people the information that they need in their state to check if they are registered, register if they're not, and get other specific information that will help to prevent issues like voter suppression. So we're very proud of that project, and I think it's a great example of how you can use social media as a channel to push things forward.
Generally, people with titles like yours are often revered, and people are looking to climb and engage at the level you're at. But I have never talked to a leader who has ascended and hasn't had to eat their share of humble pie or gone through an experience that's been like, this is a little challenging, I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. I'd be curious if you can, to share an experience where you had to take a certain level of risk in order, and you couldn't calculate it, right? You just had to jump, and you were unsure. So for whoever's comfortable, I'd be curious to know what that looks like and how you sort of navigated it.
Startup. So, you know, when I left my last agency, it's like, okay, I can continue in advertising, and stay in a senior role at another shop and do great work for great clients and it's fun, or I can say, screw all that, I'm just gonna go start a company with no money and no resources and an interesting idea and like a 10% prototype. And I've been able to do that, frankly, because I am so damn senior. Right? I think one of the problems with the so-called digital divide and the startup divide is that it's very easy for some people to sort of, you know, throw caution aside and hop into the startup game and bootstrap their work and not worry about funding. But for a lot of us, that's a little bit of a challenge. You know, so for me, taking the risk of 99.9% of startups fail. It's like starting a restaurant in New York City. It's going to be awesome for like 3 months, and then you standing outside your empty building like, man, if only we had sold the hot dogs instead of hamburgers, we could have had a thing. Like it's understanding that you can do it and sort of being comfortable with the risk was a huge challenge. And it's super scary. It's like, what happens when you don't get a paycheck? What happens if this doesn't work? And then you look back at your own sort of portfolio work, right? And it's like, well, 2 years just went away and I don't have work to show for it. Like, what happens then? It's just something that I think at a certain point, I've been lucky enough to again, be so far along, I can be comfortable with it and do it. But I also think that it's incumbent upon us those of us who have gotten to certain places in our careers to kind of kick the door open for the folks behind us, and figure out ways so it's not so challenging for folks. The challenge in starting a business should be starting the business. It really shouldn't be like, do I want the chicken ramen noodles or I want the pork ramen noodles? Like, it's part of it, yeah, but it's deeper than that.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, almost every one of the hardest situations that our company has landed ourselves in is when we're trying to do something new that we haven't done before. And it's also where we found the most success. So the risk and the reward has, you know, so far, I feel like knocking on the whole stage. It's worked out for us, but I think, you know, the first VR project that we did, the first interactive video project that we did, the first big experiential project that we did, those are always hard to do. I think that our industry is inherently risk averse. It's the reason we, you know, as an industry took a lot of heat for being slow to pick up on technology. And I think as working with people who embrace risk in a smart way is, I think, been the biggest piece of our success. Like there's nothing worse than being in what feels like an impossible situation with a team that hates each other, you know? And the most humbling, difficult, money-losing, craptastic moments of my career, I've still been surrounded with a team that believes in itself and in the people on it. So it's just, for me, it's like surrounding yourself, making sure that there are people who you're pulling up, who you're mentoring, who are reverse mentoring you has been really essential for me.
I'd also just add to that, humble pie is something that you eat every week, every other week. And it doesn't really stop when you get out of your 20s or 30s. Like, it's a continual thing. And I know from someone like myself who's been hungry in my career to want to keep on growing and looking for leadership opportunities, you step into a new environment thinking that you know the place, thinking that you know how to improve things, thinking you can do things that the previous person couldn't do. You know, and it's like sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And then you get called out. It's like, wait a minute, we've been here, we've been doing this thing, and you're going to tell us, right? And then you look back, you see another person was right. So one of the things I've learned in my career is just how do you be patient within, whether it be your career or in an environment, take as much time to learn so you can at least eat less pie. But you never stop eating. Like, it's a continual thing. And to some degree, you got to be open to it.
How do each of you stay creative? You get a lot of information thrown at you. You're at meetings. You got deadlines. You got clients. Like, is there a practice you each have, or is there a way in which you continually refresh yourself so you can be thinking of new or innovative stuff and creating that environment of innovation on your teams and for your clients?
To me, I think it's about understanding and experiencing culture over time, because when you have the pulse of culture, that allows you to take that and extract it and turn that into a valuable asset as you start to think about crafting experiences, telling stories, and that's probably the most critical thing I think that you could do. And that's about you giving yourself the ability to have experiences in your local community, but also traveling so that you get a world view. And one of the most critical things you can do is have a passport, and one of your goals should be to get many stamps on that so that you're truly having life experiences that can feel whatever you're doing.
I'd say when you're in a position to hire people, making sure that you're bringing diverse minds and diverse people to the table. Someone like myself with all this gray hair, effectively I'm the worst developer on my team right now, right? So I can't be creative as much as I could back in the day with writing code. I can help conceptually, but I have the power to affect who joins the team. And you bring people from different backgrounds, mindsets, experiences. They bring unique things to the table. You bring those people together and beautiful things come out of it. So I think I live off of that. It helps me stay sharp. It helps me to stay creative. But again, it's from the team around me, and it's not just for myself.
Yeah, for me, it's the same. I mean, I'm an executive producer who works with a roster of directors, and that roster is filled with the most creative, most insane people I've ever met in my whole life. And they keep me on my toes every day in the best and worst ways. And I think that personally, for my personal creativity, aside from what I'm able to feed off of from them, I try to keep some time in my year, not in my day, but over the course of the year, make sure I have space to make something happen that's important to me, whether that's a personal project or it's a project I'm able to do with my company or it's something I do with the people I work with, but on the side, just making sure that there's that space to make work for yourself. 2 weeks ago, we were feeling really depressed about the election, and we just went and made a video and about it on the weekend, and it felt so good. I think anybody in advertising knows how hard it is to work for other people's ideas all the time, and it's also with the hours and the demands and everything, it's just easy to let go of the stuff that you really care about and your own work. And I'm a producer, I'm not a director and I'm not a creative, but I can help bring something into the world that I really care about. And it was a good reminder to make sure there's that space for yourself in your work.
Yeah, I'd say there's no such thing as an outside project. Everything that interests me, I try to make time for, to your point, not on a day-to-day basis, because that's not going to happen. But at some point over the course of 6 months or a year, this stuff that I'm into, I go do, even if it delays my work a little bit, because you have to bring your whole self and all of your interests to the work that you do. Yeah. I'm heavily into movie trailers and television opening credit sequences, as obscure as that is. But you play awesome. the West Wing opening sequence or the Deadwood opening sequence, I can start singing it off backstage. I might do that after I had a drink when we're done here. There's something I find super interesting about it to me, and so that's what I do. And is that going to show up in code my team writes? No, maybe not. But it does put me in a place where I want to be more creative. I want to really think through ideas, and it allows me to bring my whole self to a project, which is kind of why a company's hiring you. They're hiring you as an individual. They're not hiring. That's why they're hiring you. Yeah, your book is good and your portfolio is nice, but what is the interesting twist that you, as a unique human being, brings to the work? If you're able to kind of live in that in your normal day-to-day life, then life is pretty good.
Yeah.
Awesome. I know we're close to ending, but I have sat in on a lot of panels. I'm sure you've spoken on a lot. One of the things that I find happen is a lot of inspiration, and sometimes the execution can fail, right? So we are at the end of Q3. Monday starts Q4. Whoa. What tactical thing would you say that we, the audience, myself, could start instituting on Monday that could have a direct impact on our career? So it can be something creative, it can be something personal, but give us some homework. What things should we be doing that we can help us grow and move?
I think the most critical thing you can do is define the vision of yourself and understand that that's a work in progress. But essentially, what that means is you need to define where you want to be in the future, what you're doing now to accomplish that, and what you're doing in the midterm to accomplish that, and what you're doing in the long term to accomplish that. And that may evolve over time as you learn and as you have success and as you fail. But if you're not having a clear vision of yourself, you don't have something tangible to actually hold on to, because whatever field you choose to go in, you'll need to be very passionate. You have to think about the fact that you will spend a large amount of your life in a position at work. So if you're not doing something that you're passionate about, that's not going to give you the energy that you need to ultimately be successful, because success is really going to be measured by the energy that you apply and having a clear vision to actually move forward towards success.
I would say looking at that 4, 5, 6 hour time slot between home and sleep at the end of the day, right? So you get home and some of us watch TV, some of us read, some of us go to school, some of us have family commitments. But when you look at the amount of time you have, particularly to learn something new, whether you're a designer, you want to learn some coding languages, whether you're a developer, you want to learn sculpture or design, sort of looking at that time, because unfortunately, the older you get, the less time you have. You become more efficient with it. So sort of looking at that free time, and then I think you can look at that and then build on top of the strategic plan of where you want to be, to how can you sort of tackle new things, and that just puts you forward in terms of your career.
My twist on what you said about your plan and where you want to be is to come up with a story that you tell other people about where you want to be that helps you get to that place. I was a political science major in college, and I got a job at Ogilvy because I told them that I liked thinking about how people interact with ideas, and that was my understanding of advertising. And I didn't even have an internship in advertising, but you come up with a story about why you want to try something, and if it comes from a genuine place, which it did for me, people will give you a chance. So it's both about knowing where you want to go and then thinking about how you would sell yourself to get to that place, and it's not always a perfectly straight path.
Yeah, I'd say like on a parallel path, go make something, but make something that has a defined time limit, right? Give yourself 2 weeks and make a thing. And when those 2 weeks are done, put it out in the world. Don't just sit on it. Don't just think, oh, it's not done yet. I need to have this, I need to paint every single pixel. I need to craft every single comma and semicolon in the sentence. Nah, you're wasting time, and you're wasting time, but it feels nice to kind of get in there and do it. Now, 2 weeks, put it out in the world and get feedback. And maybe it's awesome, and maybe it sucks, right? Who's to say? But it's getting it done and putting out in the world, and then getting the feedback from people who are not you or your mom, and telling you real feedback about it. Because that's the real world, right? You get a client brief, you throw your work to a creative director, and they're like, this sucks. This is terrible. You gotta know that. You don't know what that feels like. But they also might say, this is awesome. We rolling with this. Let's go. Okay, cool. You need the experience of a timeline and a time limit and external feedback. And this could be anything, but you should do that starting Monday, and then in 2 weeks, make something, and then you should use the hashtag that we're using for this and tell us what you did.
Yeah.
I like it. Are we good? Questions?
You guys have been terrific.
Okay.
So, if you want to take.
Yeah, can we take a few questions? Is that cool?
Right?
Cool. Yeah.
So I'm a
high school, I did C++ in college. Now I'm starting to get into advertising and through graphic design because I like making websites and UX UI and layout design and stuff. So what kind of advice you guys follow, the design?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. So you were saying you are looking to get into advertising via graphic design, and what advice could the panel actually give him on how to execute on that?
Don't forget your technical underpinnings. And understand that UX is driven by HCI, but you go really far if you have a real understanding of how this stuff works. And then you're sitting in a room with an engineering team, you're able to talk their language. That's a huge, huge bonus.
One other thing I'd add to that is just understand that there are multiple avenues for creatives. So, your skill set, it may be that you're a great illustrator. It may be that you're really good with Photoshop, or it might be that you just understand user experience, as Asani mentioned, leverage your tech background. So, you could fall on any silo. So for instance, like UX, you don't have to be this great visual designer to be a designer. Like UX is about thinking about the system. So if you're a great systematic thinker, you should leverage that capital. So that's just one example, but the larger take home is that you're going to be in a field that there are multiple avenues that you can be successful in that field.
Yeah.
Is there advice for if you're in a field that you're essentially working to replace yourself, to not continually think about that at work and think of other avenues in which you can either stay in that field or create another role so that you can essentially be replaceable with that.
So if I'm asking a question, you saying, how do you operate in a field where you think you're actually going to be replaced and create an environment for yourself where you can exit that field and start doing something that makes you unique and not replaceable in the future?
I think everyone's going to be replaced by a machine. So.
Or a bot.
Or a bot, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I totally get your question. I think, though, it's much more a matter of what do you, as an individual, what value do you provide? The way that your brain works as an individual, what is that? And that's the key. Every developer is going to have their job replaced by a piece of software that writes code. Every creative, I'm sorry, is going to have their jobs replaced by an AI that writes copy that's more effective than a human can. This is going to happen. Not tomorrow, not 5 years from now, but eventually it's done. And there won't be panels like this. It'll be like little robots bleep, bleep, blooping at each other, and it's going to be awesome. You'll all be replaced. Even the audience, it's going to be a thing, trust me. So how can you really figure out what do you provide, regardless of regardless of area that you're in? Because again, people hire you. You want to be a PM? Okay, cool. You want to be a CD? Okay, cool. What is it that's unique about you?
I think also just thinking ahead, like Lamar mentioned about sort of what's your plan going forward in your career. So you can look at what elements of your job now are kind of redundant, can easily be taken away, can be done cheaper in some other place in the world, right? So being very conscious of that, thinking about where you want to go, and then what do you want to be learning to sort of increment away from that. I mean, it's again, there's so many jobs out there that can be taken away, optimized by computers. We think of simple stuff like, oh, the Metro card when you buy your tokens. But it's like, no. There are corporate jobs that we write software for, and all of a sudden there's 5 people that are redundant in their roles. So you can't stay too comfortable, and you just got to be thinking about what's next.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think the critical thing is just recognizing that you are powerful and that you can transform the business that you're working with, or you can leave and transform your own business. And in that process, just constantly be listening, and learning, and applying all that you consume. Because if you're looking at the organization that you're working with, you can think about more broadly how you could transform their business and how the future you could be, much more successful in that organization. And your current tasks, you should think about those as building up to your future self. And if you do that, what your current situation is won't really matter, even for you personally, even though you're in the moment.
Oh, I had a question.
Yeah.
Up here. Hi, in the corner. My question was, I really like the concept and the thought of where this technology meets the creativity, but what I wanted to know more or hear your thoughts on were, do you see how and what types of things do you see trickling down to education? Are we talking about teacher bots? Are we talking about, I mean, we already have e-learning. Are we talking about bot students? Because maybe, I mean, what is the trickle down for these concepts that you're talking with us about today in education?
Those sound like 3 startup ideas right there.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone's not doing it, and you see that, wait a minute, can you bring these 2 things together? And someone's going to take that idea and create it. Those all seem like very possible scenarios somewhere out there that can happen.
Do we have any venture capitalists here? Venture?
One more question, just one more.
Uh,
You guys started out with kind of introducing yourselves and kind of the path that you guys have ventured down to get to where you are currently. I have like 3 pages of notes on you guys. But I just have a question. As the moderator, you're kind of, and I guess also kind of a member of this next generation. How did you kind of acquire your quest into approaching Blavity?
Yeah, so the question was, how am I sitting here, and how...
I think you just called us old.
No, it's-
I think you really just did
Yeah,
that. But that's cool.
No, you're all good. So the question was really around how I sort of transitioned myself. We can wrap after this, but I'll give you the abbreviated version. When I was in college, we didn't have that many people of my hue, and so there was a specific place where we would gather and exchange culture. There was a terminology for that on my campus. It was called Blavity. It's the word black and gravity together. It describes those moments when you might be in a space where you are not necessarily of the majority or don't feel welcome, but you find someone that has cultural salience. It can be the head nod, it's the strong dap, it's the yes, this is going to be a good day. And we wanted to recreate that. So for me, in my journey, it came down to a few things. If I was to stay in a corporate environment, would I regret not building something? Because the reality is, and I think you all alluded to this, you can always get another job, you cannot get more time. And so for me at this juncture in my life, I wanted to see what it would feel like to jump out the window and make something that I needed. Like, I need Blavity because I don't get to see my friends a lot, but when I hear their voice, it reminds me of home. And that's the type of community that I want to see. And while I'm super excited to have a chance to do that and to interact with people across the spectrum who are doing that type of work in a variety of different ways, spaces, and places. So we can talk after that.
Can we please thank this amazing panel?